Welcome to the Get Real with King Arthur show, and I have my crown today. And I'm going to talk about a deep, deep subject today called guilt. And it ties in with my philosophical disquisitions, because I believe that Rene Descartes, who said, "I think, therefore I am," needs to be corrected. I want to change it to "I ought," and "it ought, therefore I am." I think the universal experience is ought, not thought. And so, we are beset with ought. Now, remember that Martin Heidegger, talks about the being in this world and experiencing the broken hammer. It's not something's not right. That's how we perceive the outer world. But also, we perceive ourselves in terms of oughtness. So, I ought, and it ought, therefore I am. Now, there are some people, we have the extremes on either side. The psychopath feels no guilt about what he does. Some of those mass murders, unbelievable. How they can commit such atrocities and feel no shame, no guilt, whatever. The other side is something called scrupulosity, where people feel guilty about everything. John Newton, the great preacher, writer, author of the authentic narrative, biography, says that a lot of people he knows would willfully change their lives with a dog so they might get over guilt. And I think that guilt is far more a bedeviling thing than we like to talk about. But there's a way to handle guilt. I may take several sessions on this. Now, there's a religious guilt, and which is fused with a social guilt. From an early age, we have made to feel guilty. Now, no guilt is bad. That's psychopath. Scrupulosity, everything. They're guilty about everything. They feel guilty. I remember a woman said she couldn't turn the light switch on without feeling guilty. And let me start with the Christian concept a little bit and then go to the social concept. Guilt is part of the Christian faith. We feel ought before the Creator. Now, some people feel guilty all the time. And some people, psychopaths, never feel guilty. Now, I believe that if it's the spirit, if it's from a divine origin, there is such a thing as guilt. But a couple of characteristics about it. One, it isn't just general, just feeling guilty all the time. It tends to be specific about something you're doing which is not right. And furthermore, it always leads to correction. It says, yes, you're guilty, change the way you're acting, feeling, or thinking. It has a point to it. It isn't just this widespread guilt. I believe there are many people around, maybe we all, have this sense of guilt that came from early childhood. And we have all sorts of social guilt. For example, well, you don't treat your brother the way you ought to. You don't. How come you're not a well-behaved child? Do you know how much trouble it was to give birth to you and rear you? Why don't you do this right? Why don't you do that right? We are bombarded with guilt. And socially, it's kind of like religiously. If constructive guilt is guilt that says, this is something that you ought to change, not just, you're just bad boy. What the worst thing in the world is to tell some kid, you are a bad girl. Horrible, just bad. Specifically, you ought to say, you're basically a good kid, but you ought to listen to your mother a little bit more. That's constructive guilt, not just all the time, you're in the wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Are you, dear reader, listener, how are you with guilt? Listen, I believe it's pretty central to your psychological health and your spiritual health. So I'm going to talk about guilt some more. Give me some feedback.